You look pretty handsome, even though you probably don't remember how many times you got involved in fights, been arrested, in prison.
Yeah, I can't really remember because it was really a long time ago. Well, thank you for a compliment that I'm good looking, but yeah. Well, in a way, when I would be talking to my friends in Moscow and we would remember recall the past years, it would appear that majority of people, majority of my friends had a couple of knife stabs, and now they are working in fancy magazines and like or writing stories and like are pretty well off normally. So we are very happy we never died at that point. So yeah, but it was tough, but not that much. We all survived mostly. A small percent of people died.
The first time I was in Moscow was 1988. What I remember is there was no much food on the supermarkets. There was no food on the supermarkets. There was European Union delivering assistance in the Orthodox churches. That's the generation that you grew up with. What paved your way to hate?
Well, let's first make it clear that, like, from the beginning, that the protagonist of the book and me are different people. I mean, even though it's totally autobiographic and all the events in the book took place in reality, I mean, I never marketed it in a way that it's a non-fiction story about myself. So, I mean, so we are talking about myself, yeah, now. All right, not the protagonist of the book. And yeah, I guess in 1988 people were mostly humiliated not by the fact that they are not the great Soviet Union anymore, but because they all their life they were living quite petty bourgeois life. They had everything, like more or less. And yeah, late Soviet society was quite petty bourgeois. It really reminded the Finnish society or Scandinavian society of the same time. And then they lost everything. They lost the welfare. They lost the whole system of welfare and education. And the people who went in power in the 90s were neoliberal lunatics, and more or less they were totally Ayn Randian, if you are familiar. The utopia, American utopia, which inspired Chicago School of Economy, and so they wanted something like that, and from a country which used to be a totally welfare thing, and yeah, that put a huge layer of society on, of mostly the educated part of urban society, left them off for the political or social situation, and like they found that one morning they found themselves useless in the new society. So yeah, that, and they still couldn't really descend on the level of being say white trash, which is I mean, they were told that from now on they should get themselves a job in the night watch or in the supermarket, but I mean, they weren't educated for that. They whole their lives were just oriented or becoming engineers or something, and so they couldn't descend to that. They couldn't be happy drinking beer, say, or like what the proletariat do, and mostly in the capitalist countries. That wasn't their way of life, and so yeah, and then during the 90s there was a huge generation of people, the huge layer of people. The society that part of society split on the people who were ready to embrace the new rules of the game, and to buy themselves, to hunt for the commodities, say, yeah, and the other part that chose to exile, the inner exile of being just staying at their apartments, and everyone in Soviet Union had their apartments actually, so for free. So they never were homeless, and they just chose to stay in their apartments forever and like reading old books or doing crazy things, yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly why Russia in the 90s was very strong in IT, because IT is really autistic way, like what you can do if you are in inner exile. A lot of kids of my generation went IT programming. But another part of the youth, of urban youth, went subcultural, and that was also a time of a burst of different religious organizations, sects, youth movements and stuff. So it was a wonder time, very interesting. Everyone got access to information. It was also a rise of internet, and everyone got a part of connection to the information, and could whatsoever develop enormous, like endless types of whatsoever subcultures of new hobbies for themselves. So from that moment I see, from the beginning of 2000s, say, with the rise of internet, I see Russian society is really clustered. That layer of Russian society that I'm talking about, that layer of educated people who never would find their place in the society is like, say, I don't know, 30% of the society, and that makes like 30 million people, and also it's a huge population. And so I see that layer just dividing in a huge branch, like huge assembly of smaller clusters, people who would organize themselves in small communities, or in like hobby communities, or whatsoever, way of life communities. And one of them were youth political subcultures, including right-wingers and left-wingers, and all types of lunatics around them.
There are two elements, Balkan football that are all around the novel that you write. There is any kind of sense of, in this event, of revenge for what you didn't have?
All right. All the connections to alcohol and drugs in the book are mostly an exaggeration in a way. And as we talk about football, say, in Eastern Europe, in a certain point in ex-USSR, in all Eastern Europe and all, football became a very interesting phenomenon, football hooliganism. It wasn't like in the rest of Europe. It had different intellectual and different social roots, because it was something new for the local police. They couldn't really act in a proper way against hooliganism in Eastern Europe. They were prepared for a totally different way of actions with when they would come to mass disturbances and things like that. Totally different. And so it became a very interesting performance club of performative art for thousands of youth and they were not like marginalized drunk kids. A lot of them came from that precise layer of society of people from the families of intellectuals and like families of people who find themselves one day unemployed before being engineers before or teachers. And so for them it was an existential pursuit of existential experience, say, and very effective one indeed, because writing is quite interesting when you are a teenager and when you exactly know that the police can't do anything against it. So it makes it kind of safe. So a lot of people from so the football scene exploded in ex-USSR, and a lot of people who are now, they were not people who were involved into that, never were losers indeed. They were kind of losers, but the affiliation to football actually gave them more possibilities, because later on they became middle class people and like finished their academic careers, things like that. So it was helpful. It wasn't the way of a marginal, it was a way out. And Well, but the question you asked me is that was that type of performance somehow connected to the social revenge, and that is true. That is true. I mean, there is all different types of existential performance in modern arts. Say, walking naked on the street, or I don't know, playing in the church, dancing naked in the church. But it won't really respond to the feeling of ex-USSR kids, because violence was kind of really liberating in a way, because I'll try to explain it. The Soviet time was really restricted and like calm, petty middle-classy bourgeois society, but really strictly controlled. And people were prepared that the violence, by all culture, that violence is bad, violence is prohibited. All the, say, children books of the Soviet Union at that time are really peaceful, and like there is no conflict in the cartoons of Soviet era. Or there is, but it's in a different way. So they are really conflictless. The way like cartoons and books in Scandinavia now, actually, they're really conflictless. And then suddenly in the 90s, when the whole hell broke out, there was a cult of aggression, and that was kind of in a way like a homegrown child would be let on the street and would join the street gang and feel the power. And that's what all society felt in the 90s, and like the worst people of society felt that way, that now we can do anything, police is discapable, and the more aggressive you will be and ruthless, the more power and like the more the whole moral change. They say that it's morally acceptable. I mean, we never were violent that much as people in the 90s would be. We were more into making it an existential statement. I mean, the best symbol for that would be like a bunch of kids from, let's say, punk rock or hooligan scene would go to some provincial town, and there would be a group of gangsters controlling the whole town. And we would hang out at the center, and immediately those people would come in the lousy cars and like start like abusing us. And then we would beat them up and burn their cars. and that would be a real existential statement of against those people, against the 90ers. It was a war against 90ers.
What about God? How do you get to this close to? I think there is a moment that you talk in the novel where you said that you feel that the protagonist feels kind of melancholy and bored of fights, and there is you don't know exactly very much. It's not very clear in the novel how the switch comes, how things change in the mind of this person.
Well, actually, in the novel there is a point. There is a symbol of the tumbler, a lever which on some washing machine that is broken, that you turn it, and at some point that is broken, and that doesn't really affect the work of the washing machine. Or the symbol of vinyl disc, which is scratched so much that you don't hear the music anymore. So yeah, that's the exact mechanism how it works. And I think it's a good symbol. People who were involved into hard activities and would read that symbol, I guess they would understand what I'm talking about. I mean, there is a point when you can't scratch the vinyl disc anymore. You just totally lose the music. You don't hear it. You hear only noise.
There is a lot of music, a lot of rock and roll, drugs, alcohol in your novel, but there is no sex at all.
Because of my religious background, most probably. I don't know. Maybe because I'm sexually suppressed. I don't know. That's a personal question, but yeah. Yeah, and also referring to sex in the modern literature, I guess I'm not capable to do it stylishly enough, because otherwise it would turn explo, and I never wanted. I wanted the text to be very delicate.
Well, there is no sex, but you use like some kind of ugly words against homosexuals. You use the words faggots and things like that. Is a homophobic position? What do you feel?
Well, I used a lot of words of that type because all the scene was really like into anti-homophobic struggle, and I wanted to.
That's okay.
I wanted to challenge my own friends in a way. I mean, that would be funny for my friends to read it, because they were in Russia. The anti-homophobic thing is really big. Especially later years, but it was big before too. So yeah, for me, using a word like faggot would be a challenge to my own friends in a way. Yeah, but they all understood that it's a postmodernistic whatsoever joke.
Now you live in Finland. What is left from you now?
Well, I had a nice youth. I had a nice existential experience. I think it had a positive impact on me, and I have a wider picture of how society and existential experience works. And like, I can now when I read, say, Kierkegaard, I have a better understanding what he is writing about.